Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you've been following along, you know I've been working on this room in my basement for my daughter, building it from scratch. And today, we're finally getting it done. This may actually be the fastest I've ever completed a single project. I'm growing. If you missed out on any of those previous videos and you want to check them out, I'll put a link up in the corner for the playlist. But before we get started, please, you guys, hit those like and subscribe buttons. I'm finally up to 500 subscribers. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's kind of a lot for me. A nice round number, baby steps. Next step is 1,000. I know you guys can help me get there. Thank you so much for everybody who's been watching and commenting and subscribing. All right, well, enough chit chat. Let's get to it. So one thing I wanted to touch on real quick here at the beginning was my door guide here for the barn door. I didn't get to touch on this in the last video because, well, I didn't have it in time. And if you recall, what I did have was what came with the door hardware was meant for a groove door, which this clearly isn't. So I couldn't use that. Plus it would be mounted into the floor, which isn't really going to work that well with carpet. And then the one I ordered separately was going to be mounted to the trim here, just like this one, but it didn't have anything containing the door on this side. So it would have just been a barrier for the door not to be able to swing out this way, but there was nothing that would hold it from going in and hitting this trim or that trim over there, and I didn't like that. So what I got here is this, again, that's mounted right into the trim, but it's got rollers on both sides, so there's no back and forth at all with this door, and it operates very smoothly and real nice all along its travel, and it contains it on both ends, which is obviously just up to the your stoppers up on the bar. So I just wanted to show you this real quick, my little barn door roller guides here. I really like that, and that's working out real nice. Okay. If you notice up in the ceiling behind me, there's a few wires hanging down, and that's because I did a little bit of a prep work before getting started with the actual ceiling. So all I did was mount and wire in all these boxes that are going to be used for the recessed lights, just like these ones I showed in my last video that I put in over here. So I have two over here, two over here. They should be about equally spaced here through the space. Unfortunately, it's not going to be equal with that. It looks kind of like it is right now, but that's going to be closer to this light over here, which hopefully doesn't make it look too stupid. But because of this bulkhead over here, I couldn't exactly get perfect even space for these lights in the ceiling, which, whatever, it's fine. And I also have a bracket here that will be for a fan. Oops, that's loose. That's going to go up here. It's going to take the place of this box. So this light's going to go away. The box is going to go away, and I'm actually going to move it to this bay here underneath these tubes. But what I thought might be, I guess the easiest way to go about it was to wait essentially until I'm almost there, almost to the point of needing that, before mounting that, and then I'd be able to know exactly where I want to put it, because just for ease of installation, I thought I'd mount it between two planks. That way I could cut it out just on the floor with the jigsaw, which I just realized I hadn't even talked about the planks yet. So this whole time that I've been doing this room, I was expecting to be doing a drop ceiling, primarily because I just wanted to still have access to some of the stuff down here in my basement, whatever it may be, but I didn't want to completely enclose it permanently. So obviously one of the most common and best for that type of situation is a drop ceiling. Now, I don't love the looks of drop ceilings. I think they've come quite a long ways in the last several years. You can get some that look pretty nice. But what kind of disappointed me with some of that was just the cost of some of these nicer looking drop ceilings. So if you want a nicer looking drop ceiling, you're gonna pay for it. But then I noticed with Armstrong having a lot of drop ceiling products, they also had their WoodHaven plank ceilings, which are not, obviously as accessible as a drop ceiling is, but they're still a, semi-impermanent ceiling solution, to where if you absolutely needed to get up into the ceiling, you could pull them down without having to destroy the ceiling, unlike with drywall. And when I was online beginning to price things out, what I found, and unless I was completely off base and wrong, was that once you added up the prices for both, either for these planks or for an entire drop ceiling, that being the tiles as well as all the grid, price point, they weren't really that different. And for me, I didn't want to lose the 3 to 4 inches that I would lose with the drop ceiling, so I was kind of like bummed about that. But with this, while I don't have the ease of just popping a tile out and moving it to get up in there, I can still if I need to, but I get to keep my height, and I think this just looks better. So in the end, we decided to go with Armstrong's WoodHaven 84-inch ceiling planks, and we got ours in the classic white, which is just a nice white with the wood grain throughout. Now, one thing that pleasantly surprised me with these is I thought these were actually like the mineral fiber stuff, a lot like the ceiling tiles for drop ceilings. So I thought some of them was that real brittle, just kind of like breaks apart kind of material. And I think maybe they do still have some. I think maybe the 4-foot length ones are perhaps that. I'm not 100% sure. But what pleasantly surprised me with these was that they are MDF. Now, I don't know how some of you feel about MDF, but I think MDF is obviously a step up from the, mineral fiber, stuff that just kind of can fall apart if you're a little too rough with it. I can just mark and cut all this stuff with my miter saw like any old piece of wood. And just FYI, because I didn't know this either, these are only about 3/8 of an inch thick. They're not like a full 1/2 inch or anything like that. So they are a little thin, so just be aware of that. But other than that, they're fine. They're just like a tongue and groove. They fit right into each other. But they're held on by these, they're held on by these clips here. So these clips will slide into the groove of the current row you're working on. They'll screw directly into the joist. Then the tongue of the next row goes into the groove and it's held up there, and then the clips go onto that row. But that makes it like a free floating system. None of the planks get nailed or screwed up into the, let me take that back. The border planks, the first and last planks, will get screwed in on the one side into the joists. That's just because there's nothing else there to hold them in place. But everything else throughout the whole field is just free floating with these clips. So if you've ever installed any sort of plank flooring, this should be pretty familiar for you. It's basically like putting a floor on your ceiling. So the same kind of measurements and preparation that would apply for something like that kind of applies here too. So to get my starting point, I had to take the widest point of my room, which is this whole space right here. I measured that joist right there, the full length there, as well as this last one here. I measured the full length of that. This one was a 1/4 inch longer than that joist. So what you need to do then is get the midpoint of each one. So get the midpoint of that joist as well as get the midpoint of that one. And then I've marked each one of those, and now I'm going to strike a chalk line at that midpoint there. So even though these joists are different lengths, those midpoints should be lining up essentially square. And then I'll measure off of those midpoints that way, because I'm going to start on that side right up against my bulkhead. So I'm going to measure from those midpoints that way and get my starting point each one. So this side will end up a little bit closer to this bulkhead than that one. It's about 1/8 of an inch difference. It'll be 1/8 of an inch closer than this side will. But they should then essentially be starting off square in this space. And then as I'm going along, as I'm moving this way, I'll be checking periodically with this chalk line that I make here to make sure everything is staying pretty much square, because just how these things, the tongues fit into the grooves, it may not be 100% perfect, or maybe I'm not 100% perfect and like equal, across the entire space, so things can kind of be pushed out maybe a little bit over here and get things out. So be sure to measure from that baseline every so often to make sure you're staying on. And if you're not, you can maybe make some fine adjustments over a few rows and get yourself back on track. But I'm going to get some chalk lines thrown up here so I can get started. Okay, so it's another day, and I know just right at the beginning, before I started doing this, I mentioned that I would have to periodically check as I was moving this way with my planks how I was in relation to those midpoint marks I made on my joists on both sides here. And then I got this far and I realized I hadn't done that yet, so I wasn't following my own advice. But I just checked it right now on both sides, and I will pretty much perfect within like a 32nd of an inch. So I'd say that's pretty good. I was a little surprised, to be honest, but go me. I was pretty happy my planks actually lined up perfectly with that corner, so I didn't have to make any weird jigsaw cuts on any of my planks. This this side, I unfortunately did have to make a weird jigsaw cut, and it made it a pain in the butt. It was only like a 1.5 inch piece, so it was all floppy and bent really easy, and it sucked trying to figure out and make sure it was actually still straight with where the planks needed it to be, because I couldn't just rely on its distance from the wall because the wall wasn't perfectly square. Okay, so I just made a mistake. I've been doing this whole section here, and everything's been going just fine. Whatever my leftover cutoff is, I start the next row with that, and it's been going just fine. All my seams, all my joints have been offset really well. It's just looked perfectly fine going and doing that this whole time. As soon as I got to this here, I ran into a problem. I ripped and I cut this piece, and I did not think about it ahead of time. If you can look up there and see that these joints here are really close together, and I just measured and stuff, that's gonna continue on and carry on through basically over and over if I keep going with this. So I should have paid attention to that. I didn't, and now I'm going to have to cut that, and a big portion of that board is just going to be waste essentially, because I already cut that, and I shouldn't have done that. I should have thought about that, and I didn't. So pay attention to that in any job you're going to be doing. This includes with flooring. You want to make sure all your seams, your joints stay offset far enough from one another, or else it just looks like a weird stair step, and it can look stupid. So make sure you keep an eye on that, especially if it changes. You know, if your rows are going to start changing, think about that ahead of time before you start cutting stuff, because now a lot of that piece is waste for me because I didn't pay attention. I lined all these things in the ceiling up, from the lights, my vent, the fan, so that they would split halfway across 2 boards. I thought in terms of cutting, that was the easiest thing to do, and I didn't want to try to cut through the panels with a large hole saw after the fact. I just didn't know if that would have been a good idea. So I thought this was the best route. I'm going to have to get my measurements for this row. I'm going to rip that, and then these ones will get screwed in the face. I got some trim screws to do that with. So yeah, I'll pre-drill. Oh my gosh. But yeah, so I will pre-drill holes in there. I don't necessarily need every single, I don't know. I'll see if I need to do every single stud or not. But yeah, I'll pre-drill before I put in any of those screws. So it won't be messing up or bulging out the face of these at all. Shouldn't be, at least. Okay, sweet. Thankfully, I am finally done with all of these planks. It was a bit more of a chore than I thought it would be. Most of it was okay, and it wasn't like overly hard to do. Like I said, it's just basically putting in a floor upside down, you know, on the ceiling. But it was a bit of an issue once I got into this wider section here, where I was not getting good separation in my joints. If I were to just reuse whatever was cut off for the end here to start on that end, it was my joints running up way too close, and I didn't like it. And I didn't want to just waste a ton of material by cutting a bunch off or throwing stuff away. So it took quite a bit of finagling and figuring out stuff. I mean, obviously there's going to be some waste, and unfortunately there was, but not a lot. Thankfully, I was able to get it, you know, figured out for the most part and stuff. But it was definitely more of an issue. And then cutting out all these lights and this my ventilation stuff, that ended up being more of an issue than I expected it to be, getting that set up right with the ceiling here. But it's done now, and I'm pretty happy with it. It looks really nice. So other than trim around the whole outside edges to cover up you know, just the outside, the openings there, I just have one thing left to do, and that is to install, if you noticed, I had an opening, a cutout here. I'm going to install a door here. I have a connection point to one of my indoor heat pump units right above here, and I wanted to maintain access to that just in case I ever needed to get to it. Now, obviously, if I had to, I could tear this stuff out and, you know, get to it without destroying my ceiling. I would just have to put it all back, but that would be a huge pain in the butt, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to install a door here so I at least have an access panel there. I can get into that if I ever need to. Other than that, I shouldn't really need access to much up here. There really isn't anything in this particular space exactly. So that's just the one thing that I really want to maintain quick access to. This is it right here. It's just a 12 by 24 inch door. It's just primed. I may end up painting it, you know, just like a ceiling white or something like that. But I was going to get it installed first, and then I'll maybe deal with it. It's just your standard like flathead screwdriver, you know, little openings here, and then the thing just pops down, hinges open, and yeah, nothing really special about it. I did have to install some extra framing to get it in, or to give it, you know, stuff that I can actually screw into. All right, check this out. The thing practically disappears. I think it looks great. If you notice, it still has a little bit of that gap down at the bottom or at the back side, which, whatever, I guess there's nothing I can do about it. But I think it looks pretty good, and I think it kind of blends pretty well. We probably will do like a coat of paint, maybe just the ceiling white, the same thing that this stuff is, you know, and hope it just kind of, you know, disappears into the ceiling. You don't really notice it or think about it. But awesome. I got myself an access panel, and I think it looks pretty good. All right, well, here we are. There is one thing left to do, and that is to just add some trim up to the edges of all this wood, cover up all the wall joints where, you know, the planks start and stop up against the walls, just to cover up those open spaces there. After that, this room is done. Let's do it. So you'll see up here I have screws in there. I got 3 of them, but these 2 will hopefully be covered by this trim, as well as one was covered by that trim. But you'll just see one there, and I'm going to paint it the same color so it won't disappear, but hopefully, you know, it's not going to be very noticeable unless you're looking for it or looking right at it. The reason I'm doing screws is, for one, over here, again, the same thing I had with the issue down here on the baseboards. I've got nothing to nail into. I nailed up these ones here all along this here because I've got wood studs. Here I've got steel studs. I have nothing to nail into, and actually where this is above the steel studs. This is into my sill plate, so there's nothing here to really grab into, and that's actually too deep for the nails I have. Plus, there's one other issue. This ceiling isn't necessarily a permanent ceiling. I mean, it could be if you wanted it to, but I don't want it to be. I want to be able to take this down if I absolutely need to. So for me to do that, I don't want to have to nail my trim up. I want to be able to get my trim off if need be. So here is screwed so that I can take this off. Along this wall is all going to be screwed as well, so I can take this stuff off. And yeah, as you can see, so looking at this corner right here, where it's kind of goes from this low section up to the upper section, I just made a trim piece like this right here. I glued and you know, nailed those together. I'm gonna have to fill those, make that look a little bit prettier, but that's gonna go right here. And again, that one's gonna be screwed in, so I can take this down if I need to and pull all those off, as well as get to these and pull these off. So that's kind of, you know, the different thing I'm doing here, nailing up where I don't need to, because once I start pulling these off, when and if I do, it's gonna be from this side. So I need to be able to get this trimmed down over here and along these side portions so that I can start pulling these planks off. That is it. All my trim is up. I filled in a lot of the screw heads with the same color paint. I just touched them up to try and fill those in, and I think it does a pretty good job of hiding them. Obviously, if you're looking for them, you're gonna see them, you're gonna find them. But most of the time, if you're not looking, I don't think you're even gonna notice them. Another thing I'm not super happy about, but I'm not changing right now. It's just, it's too much. It's fine for now. If we want to change it, we'll change it sometime down the road. but the paint color of this trim up here, it's the same as all the rest of the trim in the room, which is a Dover white. It's a Sherwin-Williams color, which we really like. It's a nice warm white, but we didn't realize, and I guess I just didn't check ahead of time, that it would be such a stark difference between the, I guess, brighter white of the ceiling and the Dover white of our trim. So now the trim, while again, it's the same as this, it's clearly a different white than what's on the ceiling. It's got more of a yellow hue to it. Like I said, it's a warmer white than this just straight brighter white of the ceiling. So I don't love that, and where it's noticeable most is because over here you're closer to this other trim, so it's not quite as bad. You're seeing the similarities between these, and it's okay. But over here, where you just have the ceiling white, and the ceiling white and the ceiling planks, it's very just obvious, and we don't love that. So the trim, the paint color might get changed. We might just paint this stuff in place at some point, but we're not going to be worrying about it right now. This is done. I'm done. I'm moving on. If we want to change anything in here, we're going to do it later. That's fine. But thank you guys so much for watching, following along with this whole bedroom build. It's done. It's complete. We're moving on to some other stuff. The weather's getting warmer out, so hopefully we're getting some outside projects here soon. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, go and hit that subscribe button. I don't think I have anything else for you guys. Thank you so much. God bless. I'll see you next time.